say, oh yeah, no.
These guys look a little beat up.
These guys everybody died on impact versus.
I'm guessing the extent of damage made it quite obvious.
That would be my guess.
Yes.
Yeah. But that'd be why there would be a question, right? Is that?
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Now, of course, with any accident of this magnitude, there is a huge formal investigation. Takes a while because, of course, first order of business is to find the wreckage. They eventually do in 1988. That wreckage is found to be 5,000 meters down, or 16,000 feet.
Yeah, kind of far down there.
That's really far.
Deeper than the Titanic.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, way down there. And the only way they got there was with a ROV, the little remote operated vehicles, little submersibles.
Yeah.
That's the only way they could get to it.
Was it Peter Jackson? George Lucas, which is the one?
We're talking about
The guy who did Titanic?
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay, James Cameron.
James
did,
Cameron.
did Titanic.
Yeah, the
Yes.
one of the other three.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they
And this is an object of contention because I have read in incredible sources that there were 2 debris fields
instead of 3.
Yeah, I have.
Because I've read 3 most places that I've read about it.
Yeah, and I've read in other places that there were only 2 debris fields. Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about here for everybody who hasn't done the reading on it is the debris fields are where most of the stuff from the plane settles on the bottom. And there were debris fields, whether it's 2 or 3, and they were anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 kilometers apart.
Is that atypical as far as we know? I mean,
things that hit the water at great speed tend to break up, and then those individual chunks tend to separate and drift away from each other.
But not so much because tides and stuff, right? I mean,
well, there's currents and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, 2,000, 1,000 meters, that's not actually all that far when you think about how far it had to sink.
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
oh no, for sure. And
I
also,
just wasn't sure if it was like atypical that it would be, 3 or 2 or what, if that mattered, if that number mattered, or we were
I don't think it really. I don't think it was.
Bringing it up for fun. Got it.
Nope. I don't think there was any significance to it.
Okay.
I mean, some people believe that it might have meant that the plane broke up in midair before it hit, but it's
maybe.
Yeah,
I could see how you would take it that way.
It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what happened.
No, because I mean, I'm sorry, if you think about an airplane coming down at an angle and tumbling when it hits the water, that thing's gonna fly into a bunch of big chunks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, it's gonna get spread out because some things weigh a lot more than other things. Some things,
fuselage is gonna sink
faster.
Is gonna stop faster than say broken off wings.
Yeah.
It took a while, but as we had talked about, eventually they did get the cockpit voice recorder that was found, though the flight data recorders were never found. And if anybody's interested on how flight data recorders work, Stuff You Should Know did a great episode on it, and it took them an hour to explain it all, so we're not going to go into this.
The thing about the data recorders is why haven't they invented a self-ejecting one that senses a crash is about to occur and just pops itself out of the plane? Because it's always such an ordeal to find that thing.
I just don't know why they don't make them more floaty.
Yeah, they should they should be floaty.
Term?
It is the technical term, yeah.
More floaty?
Yeah.
I learned that on the cruise ship. Everybody can take a drink. Just trying to get drinks in for our drinking friends.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure that's one on the drinking game.
Yeah, no doubt. I think just like tape them to the outside of the plane so they come off in a crash and they float up to the surface.
Yeah, thing.
Yeah.
Just
floaty.
change the duct tape every 3 flights or whatever.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, with when you're examining all of the oxygen things.
Yeah,
the oxygen generators,
Yeah, oxygen generators.
Okay, so they send the ROVs down. The ROVs recover parts of the plane, the things that they think are going to be important to examine. They can't get it all because the seas, A, it's so far down, and B, the seas just are not cooperating.
Yeah.
So they took what they could. They took all the debris back to South Africa, where the official investigation started.
Sorry, I might have missed it because I was busy reading ahead or something. Did we say what ocean and where they were found eventually?
Well, no, we said
It was
145 miles or so away.
So that's
from
where they actually
Mauritius.
were, and that's where they were found.
Yes, which ocean is that? That's the
Indian Ocean.
Indian? Okay.
So it's actually, the debris was found right about where everybody thinks MH370 is. Right in that neighborhood.
In that little triangle.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
That's helpful, actually. Yeah. I was just sorry.
No, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Where was I? So the official investigation. It starts. What they find is they find that something had caught fire in the cargo area on that main deck.
The above cargo area.
On the main deck where passenger seating would be.
Okay.
Yes, not the baggage.
In the combined area.
Yes.
Got it.
The combi area of the plane.
combi, if you will.
They find that it's on the right front pallet, which is referred to as PR, which I'm going to guess means pallet right.
Yeah. So
I
the right pallet closest to.
Okay, so if you're sitting on the plane, or let's say you're at the back of the plane and you're looking forward to the cockpit,
Yep.
on your right-hand side, there's going to be 3 pallets, and on your left-hand side, there's going to be 3 pallets because they were in 2 rows. The very farthest one forward, so 1, 2, 3,
aft?
the most to the right.
Not the most aft.
No.
Yeah.
The most front.
Yeah, the most front of
Got it.
the
Front right.
Yeah, front right.
Front right pallet.
That's sorry.
To the partition.
I think I know what I'm talking about, and I think you're talking about the same thing, but you're making me nervous with how much you're explaining it. So if I'm the last row on the right side, it's directly behind me.
Yes.
Okay.
In passenger seating, it would be behind the galley wall on the right-hand side. Yes.
Through probably a bathroom.
And on fire.
Yep.
Yeah.
But on fire. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. So that's where it was.
Okay.
That's where they said they figured out a fire was at.
Yeah, because they looked at the pieces of fuselage that came from there, and there was like evidence of intense heat there, right? So that would have been the fuselage above PR. Mm-hmm. All right.
And so what nobody's sure of though is where the fire was. I mean, it could have been PR, the pallet that was sitting in that location, was on fire and burning, or was it something up high that was burning? Like, they never really knew what was causing it. All they could tell is that it did a ton of damage.
And they also could tell, this is a question, that it wasn't something that was of lower flammability somewhere else that caught on to something on that pallet that was of higher volatility.
We don't know if the fire jumped from one place to another and then scorched the ceiling.
But that was where the most intense.
That's where the fire that they could tell based on the metal. It burned hot enough that it pitted the metal and there was slag thrown around.
Yeah, that's pretty hot.
Really, really hot.
Yeah, really, really hot.
Yeah, and of course they concluded that the pallet itself, something in it started the fire, most likely.
Well, that's what they believed.
Right. But so that was my question: is like if something of lower volatility happened to catch fire, deeper in the hole.
The fire jumped.
Yeah, and that it was just that there was a lot of volatile stuff on that pallet, for instance.
We don't know. It was wrapped in plastic. It was computer stuff.
Oh.
And it was wrapped in, what the heck was it? Polystyrene packing. So it's plastic wrapped around hunks of plastic.
Yeah.
So plastic burns hot, but...
Yeah, not that. But that was pallet PR that had that cargo?
Yep, that was PR.
Okay.
Yeah, it was computers was what it was.
Okay.
Which are all plastic.
Yeah.
There's very little metal in a computer.
It seems unlikely that...
Well, I mean, it depends. It could have, but it's hard to say.
Yeah.
So this is 1987, so there's a whole mess of really cool vintage computers scattered about the ocean floor.
Yeah.
That are like partially burned and melted, probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I would go for doubloons. Joe's going for melted computer parts.
Yeah. I'm just going to go for a galleon, of whatever. I don't care.
I want a galleon, gold.
Yeah. But most everything that was in the cargo hold area was polystyrene wrapped.
Just plastic, yeah.
Except for there was a few things that were cardboard boxes, and there was a few heavy items that were like auto parts things that were in wooden boxes.
Okay, crates.
Crates, yeah. They were crates with hay packing, stuff like that. So this seems to be what would have been the most flammable to burn hot and hard.
So it's weird that it was a pallet full of computers and plastic.
It's a little bit, makes you kind of wonder what's going on.
Things that make you go,
Yeah, maybe it was not really that at all.
Maybe not. And there are some theories that say that, but actually, before we get into theories, I do want to point out something that I have seen that I don't really like.
Yeah.
And this
I agree with you.
Peeves me off.
I agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. There are several sites that say there's things that say that the crew did not follow their fire procedure, which would be the smoke evacuation checklist. That checklist would say that in the event of a fire, you descend, you open the doors to depressurize the plane to suck all the smoke out. By the way, you have to do that after the fire's out. You can't do it while the fire's still going.
Obviously, yeah.
Bad idea. But these places say that they didn't do it, but they have no way of knowing that because the flight had already said it was descending, and then minutes after that, we lost
They
contact.
went away, yeah.
I'm sure they were probably highly motivated to go back there and put that fire out. I'm guessing.
I'm pretty sure that this "they didn't follow the checklist" thing comes from a TV show.
Yeah.
There's a TV show called Mayday, or depending on which country you're in, it's under a number of different names. There's Air Crash Investigations, Air Emergency, Air Disaster.
all
Really
the same
great
thing.
names.
Yeah.
which these shows have evidently been on for a while. They go through seasons.
This sounds like the show that they're showing on the airplane in Airplane. Right?
It
I
probably
think it
was.
probably is,
on
yeah.
there,
Are you talking about the in-flight movie?
Yeah,
When
when
the
it's
plane
just
crashing?
airplanes crashing. Yeah.
That was so awesome.
We probably shouldn't be laughing at
No,
it, but
it's okay. These goofballs, though, they say this and they put a negative spin on it, and it's not appropriate in my mind because they have no way to know that. From what we know, they were following what they should have been doing.
I would imagine they would. Like I said, they were motivated.
Well, and here's some there's some specifics that prove that they were probably doing it because at 29 minutes and 5 seconds on the voice recorder, the captain's heard asking the main deck cargo or asking for the main deck cargo fire checklist. So he's asking for it. This is again minutes before the transmission's lost. So it seems like they were doing what they were supposed to.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want folks to understand is what a terrible idea it turns out the combi was, and how terribly it performed in the event of a fire.
Well, I mean, the combi was a great idea. It just
It's a great
It just
idea.
didn't have a good fire suppression system in the cargo hold.
And
That's
there
all.
was some bad math, I would say. Some bad math was done on the way things worked. And let me run this through so people know where I'm going with my kind of
yeah,
my little
yeah, please.
I'm soapbox, I know. The size of the cargo hold in that area is 9,600 cubic feet. I don't know what that converts to in meters. I didn't do the math on that one. Sorry, folks. But it's that area was thought, that big of an area was thought that it would help keep byproducts of a fire, aka smoke, from getting into the passenger cabin based on the fact that there was a pressure difference between the two.
Right, one was, yeah.
The passenger cabin was at a higher pressure than the cargo hold. Though the seal of the little movable wall that they had wasn't an airtight fit. It had a 25 centimeter thick seal, but it wasn't completely airtight, but air would flow from high pressure cabin to lower pressure cargo area. So it makes sense to think, well, great, that'll keep all the smoke back there. But it turns out when there's a raging hot fire,
Pressure changes.
the pressure changes.
Weird.
The air heats up, and
Yeah,
next thing
and
you know.
suddenly the flow reverses, and it all rolls into the passenger compartment.
Yeah.
So that was a problem.
This actually is the thing about it is you know, they might actually have been overcome by smoke inhalation, and if they had just deployed their oxygen masks, and I don't know if these guys actually have like portable oxygen units to where they can go fight the fire while they're wearing a gas mask.
The crew,
Yeah.
I believe they were supposed. I believe there is that.
Yeah, so that's you know, I mean, I think that if they had just deployed their oxygen for the passengers themselves, that it might have turned out a little differently.
Well,
I
it's
couldn't say.
that's a hard one, having gone through firefighter training on my time on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
It's startlingly hard to navigate an area when it's filled with smoke.
I bet.
Even when you have your little mask on and you're breathing real oxygen. I mean, you know, they train you to like follow the wall, but in this huge cargo hold that you're not, you know, it's just filled with smoke. You don't know where it's coming from, and you probably have your tiny little fire extinguisher. Like, there's no way all bets are off. There's no way you're gonna find that fire probably, or find the right thing, or maybe you don't have the right extinguisher, or
Well, fire suppression was also one of the big problems with the combis.
Yeah.
Because, okay, let's talk about this, is that in an airplane, if the cargo hold where your bags go on a passenger airline catches on fire, the guys in the cockpit get a warning light, and they push a button, and Freon gas is blasted in there, and it extinguishes the whole thing. But like we talked about, you can't do that in an area that potentially would have human beings.
You can't do that.
So
it kills that. Just in case anybody was wondering, it will kill you.
Yeah, don't go
immediately.
Yeah, don't be huffing the Freon.
Don't do
that.
it.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. It's.
Yeah. So instead, what the process was is, then what we'll do is as Devin was talking, is that we'll send one of our crew members with their mask and a fire extinguisher into that area that is
presumes they
smoke-filled.
have a mask. I don't even know if they do on.
I think they did. I got the impression that they would.
You would think that they would, because it makes no sense to send somebody into a smoke-filled cargo hold without a breathing apparatus.
Yeah.
He's gonna last about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So the point is that they could get in there. And then they had to put out the fire.
Dark and smoke-filled.
Yeah, before we could open the doors and vent the plane.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was another suppression system that I was reading about that uses CO2 to snuff out the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work out so well either. I can't remember the flight, but they had that. They
were nose down.
The pilot had nose down for obvious reasons. He was taking it closer to the ground.
Wait, back up, Joe, so everybody knows. What Joe's talking about is a flight that catches on fire, and they put out CO2, which it doesn't burn.
It's in the cargo hold only where they put up the CO2.
And so it kills the fire, but then the plane noses down. CO2 is heavier, so it runs downhill with the plane and fills the cockpit with CO2 and kills the flight crew.
Exactly.
And the plane goes down.
It didn't work out. That's another instance where it really would have been a smart idea for them to put on their oxygen masks.
But the problem with CO2 is you don't know it's there. They had no way of knowing that it was going to flow.
Except for that they deploy. I mean, use some
common sense. Well, they knew they were
sense.
doing it, but they didn't know that it would flow in there.
You're right.
It was supposed to be separated.
I get that, but here's my message to the airlines if they haven't gotten it already. Is whenever a fire breaks out, everybody in the cockpit puts on their masks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Unless it's the oxygen system is on fire, then.
Oh yeah, in that case,
then that's a bad problem. Last thing that I want to point out in defense of the crew doing what they were supposed to be doing is we talked about that somebody had to go back into that area to fight the fire.
That would be a tough thing to do.
Yeah, well, one of the fire extinguishers was recovered. It was a fire extinguisher from door 2R, which I will be honest, I don't know exactly where that is on the plane. But what is important to note is that it had stuck to it the webbing or netting that was used in the cargo area at the door, which means the stuff was hot and it hit it and stuck to it and, cooled on. So they know that somebody was taking a fire extinguisher into that area
and maybe
to try and combat the fire.
Yeah, and maybe getting overcome with smoke inhalation.
Maybe, I don't know. But that was one of the 11 fire extinguishers total that were on the plane.
And for all we know, more of them were being used by the fire.
Yeah, because this is the only one they recovered.
Yeah.
So there was a bunch of them that we just don't know where they went.
Yeah, they probably could have recovered a lot more stuff, but that would be expensive.
It would be very expensive.
Yeah.
And at some point,
all
it's
investigations
just not, worth it anymore.
Yeah, I think once they recovered that piece of the fuselage that had the extensive heat damage, and that's sort of like because you never know.
Sealed the deal.
Kind of sealed the deal. I mean, if they recovered more pieces, they might get more information that would lead them in a different direction.
Maybe. But that's the end of the soapbox that I was standing on in defense of the crew.
I think it's important.
Yeah,
you do see a lot of stuff out there with people saying, "Oh, the crew if they had just done better." But it's just like, God, until you're in that situation, until you really listen to the transcripts, until you take that step back.
Think about the passengers freaking the F out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, that to then try to work your way back through the plane, it's actually believed that most of the passengers had gotten out of their seats and had moved to the front of the plane to try and escape the smoke that was coming out from the back wall. So,
I mean, that's not a good situation.
It's not good. It's not good. And then, on top of that,
that
you
could
don't
be why
know,
he shouted, "Shut the bleeping door."
I mean, I think you never know as a person how you're going to react in a situation like that. And that includes people who are the crew. true.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it's possible that it was just one or two members of the crew kind of holding it together, trying to fight back against the 140 people trying to get there to
140
save their lives.
passengers.
And
I
that's
can't imagine what
crazy.
it's like if you're piloting the plane also.
That's why you
And-
close the door.
And but if you're dealing with this whole situation with fire and communicating with the tower and everything where you're going, and at the same time suddenly a huge amount of weight has suddenly just shifted to the front of the plane.
Yeah.
And you've got to take care of that. I mean, that's got to be
going to
tough.
really screw things
Yeah,
up as
it
well.
absolutely is,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that could have been done. You know, maybe perhaps if the passengers just stayed put, perhaps if the crew had put their masks on, and
But this is
they might have been
like-
overcome by smoke. I
Again,
mean,
this is
but-
that whole like
but we don't
what if
know.
rabbit hole.
We just
I
don't
want to
know.
point out, this is total conjecture.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know if they did or did not don their masks, whether the passengers did or did not stay in their seats. These are things we just don't know.
No.
See, and this is the upside to air disasters too, is that we always learn something from them. I mean, air travel now is so much more safer, and the reason is because we spend a ton of money and
Figuring
time.
out what went.
Yeah, I know. Now it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
God, we don't do it that way.
Same with the Titanic, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into theories
Yeah.
because there are a huge number of theories
Yeah.
on
Oh, yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
Some very far-fetched and some obscenely logical. And we're going to start.
Obscenely logical.
Actually, I've only seen one that's really totally logical. but-
Well, I've seen two, but that's me. So let's start with the one of the far out ones because I always like to start with some of the far out
I
ones.
like this one.
yeah, I like this guy's webpage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So the first theory is that the plane was sabotaged. We are going to start by talking about a guy named David Mechanic, and he spells that with a K. The mechanic is.
Is it actually pronounced mechanic as opposed to mechanic or something like that?
I'm going to say he's a mechanic.
Let's call it mechanic then.
I like it mechanic.
Let's call him the mechanic.
The mechanic, by his own description, was a weapons engineer, and he said he worked for the South African government in the late 80s, and according to him, he was contracted to, I love this, build a weapon capable of taking out MiGs out of the sky while at the same time making it look like pilot error.
Well, that's so easy to do. How do you do that?
Well,
Lasers.
Lasers!
Lasers.
By the way, if anybody doesn't know, a MiG is a fighter jet.
Yeah, the Soviet
Yeah,
MiGs. But,
Soviet
okay.
Yeah, no, let me keep going with this. So,
Now, what's interesting is the materials that you needed for a super weapon.
this is why I love this one.
They're pretty normal.
He said that he did make the weapon, but he was missing one vital piece, and that was plutonium-239. You know, the same stuff that Doc Brown needed to make the DeLorean travel through time.